Vandy beat Alabama.
They did.
Vandy beat Alabama by a 40-35 score. This game was the epitome of Snaggletooth Saturday, Dan. You got to watch for the jagged edges. Even still, even you in your infinite wisdom taking Vandy in the points could not have predicted a plot twist quite like this. It was just 1 week after Alabama knocked off Georgia. Bama goes on the road. They lose by 5.
Yeah.
Immediately following the win, fans obviously stormed the field. I don't know if you saw, but on the Jumbotron on the PA system, of course, they played the clip of and the audio for Nick Saban and his game day quote about how the easiest place to play in the SEC is Vanderbilt. Fans subsequently tore down the goalposts. I believe they paraded it down Broadway in Nashville, if I saw correctly.
Yep.
Which is kind of a cool scene. For lack of better terms, this is, in the entire span of time that we've been doing this show, one of the craziest results I can ever imagine.
Have you seen the movie Slumdog Millionaire?
I have.
So obviously the big, not twist, but the reveal in it is he knows all of those answers because of very specific life experiences coming across the answers on that game show. The way that Vanderbilt beat Alabama, the plays that they called, the situations they found themselves in, the play calls that they called that resulted in huge plays on 3rd and short, 4th and short, whatever. It felt like that was all assembled over the course of this season, right? It didn't feel like it was like the game plan was come up with Tuesday late at night or something like that. It felt like the culmination of weeks and weeks of work and preparation, because you look at how long Vandy had the ball. You look at the plays that Diego Pavia was able to make. You look at the confidence that Vandy was able to play with against Alabama the week after they beat Georgia, that there was something bigger about what Vandy put into this game. And why wouldn't you, right? Everybody, you're going to circle this game, in the summer, in the spring, whatever. If you're Vanderbilt, with all the changes that they made, bringing in Diego Pavia, bringing in Jerry Kill and Tim Beck, all these guys, losing who they lost on both sides of the ball, that this was a game that they were just ready to kick ass in from the opening moments of the game, whether it was the pick six, whether it was the strip sack, whether it was just maintaining possession as long as they did, absorbing whatever it was that Jalen Milroe,
Gotta get it right.
We got a note. I apologize. Jalen Milroe and Ryan Williams were able to accomplish together magically, I should add. Ryan Williams is magic. I don't have a better adjective for Ryan Williams at this point. And he is 17? Fact check that?
Yeah. 17.
Fact check. 17 years old. It was masterful. Vanderbilt was masterful at home, and this is just what Diego Pavia does to SEC teams.
Well, so
who
here's
are
the thing.
favored to beat Diego Pavia.
Here's the thing. Here's one of the interesting factoids that I was able to mine.
Yeah.
Before this game, Diego Pavia was tied with Eric Dungy, longtime favorite of this show, and Skylar Thompson, formerly of K-State, now with the Dolphins, for the most wins by a quarterback in games where their team was a 21 or more point underdog over the last 20 seasons.
He at least did that against Skylar Thompson and against Oklahoma at least once.
Right. They each had 2. All 3 of those guys had 2.
Great.
Obviously, now this gives Diego Pavia 3. It was clear that Vandy just built the whole plane out of him. And he continually found ways.
Eli Stowers, too, was an important deal here. Yeah.
Sure, but Pavia was the engine.
Yes.
And it was clear that he was finding ways to make big plays without making big mistakes, which is a big deal. And, we could talk about what else transpired this week and how other mistakes did kind of dictate how this week went down. But Diego Pavia did not falter in this moment. And I don't know how many people had Diego Pavia outplaying Jalen Milroe on the bingo card, but here we are, right?
Yes.
What struck me was this. If you watched this game, even if you didn't, you mentioned some of the moments, the ricochet off the player that led to a pick six, the strip sack, that type of thing. These games always have moments. Oftentimes, though, they feel like a fluke.
Yeah.
This did not feel like a fluke to me. I watched the whole game. This was not a fluke. Vandy never trailed in this game. They held the ball for 42 minutes, as you said. You can only control that much of the football if your offensive line is playing well, and it did play well. You could only control the ball that long if you're effective on third downs. They were 12 of 18 on third downs,
Dominated.
which
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if you're playing Bama, if you're playing Alabama State. Who cares? 12 of 18 is a really good number on
That's
third
a root
downs.
canal, right?
Yeah. It's incredible. So this was against Bama at home a week after that big win. For Vandy to go out there and essentially be dominant in the manner that they was, or to the degree that they could be dominant, is a huge deal for Clark Lee. It validates all of the offseason changes that you described earlier, bringing in basically New Mexico State.
But losing, right? Losing the receivers they lost. I think it was Nate Clifton, the key defensive lineman to USC.
Sure.
A couple years ago, was it Ray Davis to Kentucky, right?
Yep.
Like big names for this a young, promising team. Yeah.
So they're now 3-2. They stand an excellent chance to get to 6 wins and go to a bowl, which frankly 2 months ago was inconceivable. And I would just shift gears a little bit and say on the Bama side, I mean, I know we want to celebrate Vandy, but on the Bama side, obviously this raises a few questions. If you follow the newsletter, like Jake and I in this week's version talked about Kalen DeBoer trying to conjure the spirit of Nick Saban, talking about the rat poison. Everybody remembers his rat poison comment.
Yeah.
And Kalen DeBoer went so far as to set rat traps around the football building just to remind people like you're not as good, or you're never as good as the media wants you to believe you are. And we're now working on 6 straight quarters, I'd say, of curious play by Alabama. Got off to a big lead against Georgia.
Yeah.
Allowed Georgia to come back into that game the last 2 quarters. Now we had 4 quarters of this. There are still 4 ranked teams on this schedule, as well as a road game at South Carolina next week, and then the Iron Bowl to close things out. Alabama's got a long way to go. This is not to say they're a bad team. This is not to say that they're in danger of really anything, but they got to shore up whatever is going on here over the last game and a half.
I'm going to be not a wet blanket. I don't know what I'm going to be here. This was a not great day for Alabama, and we shouldn't judge Alabama in the Kalen DeBoer era on the Vanderbilt game, just like we shouldn't judge them on the back half of the Georgia game, and we shouldn't judge them on the first half of the Georgia game or the fourth quarter against USF, any of their highs and any of their lows. It's Kalen DeBoer's first year. This is not a team that he recruited. This is him using, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but this is not something that this is not a mandate or whatever on Kalen DeBoer. And
a referendum.
A referendum, excuse me. Thank you. And so the story to me is still Vanderbilt. And as good as Jalen Milroe is, and Ryan Williams, and all the running backs for Bama, the playmakers on defense, this is Vandy. This is situational magic for the Doors, and a program-defining win for Clark Lee, who, by the way, never too high, never too low. Clark Lee just sort of had his hands up at the end of it and was just like very happy for these guys. Even like his halftime interviews, his mid-quarter interview was like, we'll see what happens. There's not a lot of fire to him, and I'm not saying that as a negative thing. And it was just an interesting watch that they just sort of were steady Eddie, kept going at Bama. Yeah,
just to put it in context, and then we'll move on. Vandy had been 0-60 as a program.
Yeah.
Before this game against AP top 5 teams. Clark Lee obviously gets a big one here. The situation as a whole.
Do you see what I tweeted out, by the way, about that stat?
Oh, well, they were 0-60, but you can't expect them
nobody
to go
beats
0-61.
Vandy 61 straight times.
Yeah.
There's an old shirt was like, nobody beats Vitas Gerulaitis 17 straight times after Bjorn Borg beat him 16 times in a row. Continue.
The other thing, if we zoom out a little bit more, not just within the context of Vandy, but Alabama is just the 4th number 1 team in the AP poll era to lose a game to an unranked opponent the week after beating a top 2 ranked opponent. And furthermore, this has not happened since 1960. Got to go back 83 years? No, what is that? 63 years. I'm not a math major.
No,
it's
you're
been
okay.
a long time. It's been a long time. And these situations come about once in a blue moon. So good on Vandy. Apologies to any Alabama fans out there. You will ultimately be fine and probably
they're not
still
listening.
Make the
They're
playoff.
not listening.
They are not listening.
They'll download and support, but I think they're going to take the week off, especially as you turn into Ty Hammond over there with the fun facts to just drive that screwdriver in a little bit more.